My name is Simone Ardell Tate. I am 34 years old. And last April, I sat in the parking structure of a Houston hospital at 11:47 at night still in my scrubs, granola bar wrapper in my lap, and read through 29 text messages from people I had not spoken to in 8 years. My father, my brother, 3 aunts, cousins I'd only ever seen at holidays. People who had once stood in a circle and told me, in various formations of the same sentence, that I was the problem. Not one message said they were sorry. Every single one said some version of the same 4 words. We need your help. I sat there with my phone face down on the passenger seat for a long time. Not because I was angry. I was well past angry. I sat there because I needed to decide, very quietly and very deliberately, what kind of person I was going to be about this. And before I tell you what I decided, I need to take you back. All the way back to the night that started all of it. Christmas Eve. 8 years ago. Claremont, Mississippi. Population just under 3,000 and declining. Our house on Birdsong Road smelled like sweet potato casserole and wood smoke, and the particular staleness of a home where too many people are pretending everything is fine. My brother Andre was home from his second year at LSU, the first person in our family to attend a 4-year university, which meant he moved through every room slightly elevated, and everyone let him. My grandmother, Mama C. Cecilia Tate, was in the kitchen making biscuits from memory, the way she had every Christmas since before my father was born. Aunts, uncles, cousins crammed into a house designed for 4. I was 26. I worked full-time at a medical records company in Hattiesburg and drove 40 minutes each way every single day. I took healthcare administration courses online on Tuesday and Friday nights, after my shift, at the kitchen table, sometimes still in my coat, and I had saved, quietly and carefully, almost $2,000 toward the application costs and first semester fees for a licensed practical nursing program. I hadn't told anyone, partly because I didn't want the questions, partly because I had learned, early and specifically, that in my family, a plan that hasn't happened yet is an invitation for someone to need it. That Christmas night, my father Raymond stood in the doorway holding a paper plate and announced that Andre had made the dean's list. The room erupted. Aunt Rochelle grabbed his face with both hands. Mama C said glory so quietly it barely moved the air. My father's expression, a face I had spent 26 years trying to read something warm in, broke open into a smile I had never once seen pointed at me. I clapped. I meant it. Andre worked hard. He had earned it. But then my father said, "At least one of mine is going somewhere." He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. I want to be honest with you here, because this is the part I rarely tell. I didn't cry. I didn't leave the room. I stood there and felt something inside me go very still the way water goes, still just before it freezes. And I thought, with a clarity I hadn't expected, I am going to leave this place. I don't know when, but I am going. Later that night, after I had washed every dish because I always washed the dishes, Mama C sat with me at the kitchen table. Everyone else had moved to the living room. She was the only one who ever stayed. I put in the application, I told her. For the nursing program. She reached across the table and put both her hands over mine. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The timeline, the fees, the financial aid gap I was still trying to close. She listened the way only she could, completely still, completely present, like your words were the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "Baby, you are going to get there. I know it the same way I know rain." I held on to that sentence for years, longer than I held on to almost anything else from that house. 3 weeks into January, my father found my savings account printout on the kitchen counter. I had set it down when I was sorting mail. Careless, costly. He didn't ask me about it. He sat me down and explained that my cousin Terrell had gotten into a situation involving money and certain people he was not specific about. He said the family needed to come together. He said $1,500 would make it manageable. He said it the way he said everything, not like a question, like a weather report. I said no. The silence after that word was the loudest thing I have ever heard in a kitchen. "After everything this family has sacrificed for you," he said. Low, controlled. That was always the more dangerous register. I looked at him across that table. The same table where I had done homework alone every night until I was 18. Where I had paid the electric bill twice out of my own paycheck because he came up short. Where I had driven Andre to school for an entire semester when my father's car was in impound. I looked at him and said, as evenly as I could, "Raymond, what has this family sacrificed for me? Tell me specifically." He called me cold. He said I had always been cold, just like my mother, which was the sharpest thing he owned because my mother had left when I was 9, and nobody had ever explained why, and he only opened that door when he needed to cause damage quickly. It worked. It always worked. Within 2 hours, the phone calls started. Aunt Rochelle. A cousin I barely knew. Someone's boyfriend I had met once at a cookout, apparently qualified to weigh in on my character. Each one saying some version of the same thing in a different order. Family first, Simone. You're not the only one struggling. Terrell needs us. Nobody asked what I was saving for. Not one person. That night, I packed one bag. I went to Mama C's room at midnight. She was sitting up like she'd been waiting. I'm going, I told her. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She went to her nightstand and pulled out a white envelope, soft at the edges, the way paper gets when it's been handled with care for a long time. $420. 12 years of birthday 5s and 20s, saved in secret, without telling a soul, because she had understood something about me before I had the courage to understand it about myself. I held that envelope against my chest. Then I held her. You call me when you land somewhere safe, she whispered. Somewhere with a window that gets morning light. I drove out of Claremont at 12:40 inches the morning. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew the direction. Away. I need you to sit with that for a second. Because I have met people who hear this part and say she had a choice. She could have stayed and worked it out. And maybe. But those people have never been in a room where the people who are supposed to love you are explaining, calmly and collectively, why your future matters less than their emergency. That room has a particular gravity. Sometimes the only way to survive it is to leave it entirely. Houston found me somewhere along I-10 West when I ran out of the specific courage it takes to keep driving into nothing. I slept in my car for 5 nights in a 24-hour gym parking lot. Showered at the gym on a drop-in fee twice before I could afford a membership. Applied to every medical office and administrative role I could find from the front seat of that car on my phone. On day 7, a physical rehabilitation clinic on the west side called me in. The office manager was a woman named Carol Nwosu, who looked at my resume for about 45 seconds, looked at me for 10, and said, "You drove here from Mississippi alone. Why?" I gave her the short version. She hired me that same afternoon. $11 an hour. Part-time. It became full-time by the end of month 2. I won't pretend those first months were anything other than hard in ways I don't fully have language for yet. I ate a lot of rice. I split a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 strangers from an online listing, one of whom kept the most chaotic schedule I have ever witnessed, and one of whom, a woman named Fatima Osei, became one of the most important people in my life. Fatima made tea every Sunday morning with a ceremony that involved 3 specific spoons, and took 20 unrushed minutes, and she never once asked me to explain myself. That kind of acceptance, when you've come from a place where you had to justify your existence constantly, is almost unbearable in how good it feels. Back in Claremont, in the fragments that reached me through Mama C's careful phone calls, my father had told people I'd had some kind of episode, that I wasn't stable, that the family was worried about me. He used the word unstable at church, Mama C told me, and I could hear the fury she was too dignified to fully release. He can't reach you from this far, she told me. Don't give him a longer arm. I tried not to. But there is a specific grief in being unable to answer for yourself, in knowing a false story about you is circulating in the place you came from, and every person who hears it has no reason to doubt it because you aren't there to contradict it. You become whatever they need you to be, the cautionary tale, the difficult one, the woman who cracked under pressure that everyone else supposedly handled just fine. It costs something, carrying that, even from a distance. Honestly, if that had been me 2 years earlier, it might have taken something important from me permanently. But I was in Houston. I had a job. I had Fatima and her 3 spoons and her Sunday morning tea. I had Mama C's voice on the phone every Sunday after, and I had a new application submitted this time to an accredited LPN to RN bridge program through a consortium attached to a major Houston medical center. I worked mornings. I studied nights. Fatima quizzed me on medication classifications at our kitchen table while we ate whatever was on sale from the grocery 2 blocks over. I passed my boards in 2021. Fatima made a banner so large she had to fold it in thirds to get it through the apartment door. Mama C called me from her landline 30 seconds after I texted her. I knew it, she said. Same way I know rain. By 2023, I was charge nurse in the rehabilitation unit of a mid-sized hospital network in Southwest Houston. By early 2025, I had been appointed clinical care coordinator, a workforce development and staff retention role focused on underserved community health settings, the youngest person ever appointed to that position in the network's history. One of the very few without a graduate degree, which meant I had to be twice as precise, twice as documented, and never visibly uncertain under pressure. I didn't mind. I had been training for pressure my entire life. At least now the pressure came with a salary. I bought a small craftsman house in South Houston. Original floors, a deep front porch, a side garden that gets good light from about 7 in the morning until noon, exactly the kind of window Mama C had told me to find. I did not tell my family any of this. Then came April. 12-hour shift, parking structure, scrubs, granola bar, and 29 messages from people I'd blocked years ago who had found a way around the block through a mutual contact I've never been able to identify. It no longer matters. Andre's messages started casual. Hey stranger, long time, hope you're well. Hit me when you can. By the 4th message, he was explaining that his new landscaping company needed a co-signer for an equipment loan because his credit was, in his words, still recovering. My father's messages were shorter. He had a degenerative spinal condition, a procedure his insurance wouldn't fully cover. He needed help from someone in a stable position. Aunt Rochelle sent 2 paragraphs about how much she missed me and loved me. Paragraph 3 was about Terrell's ongoing legal situation. Apparently the pulling together had become a recurring event. Terrell himself sent 4 messages. The first was a gif of a waving hand. I read all 29. Then I sat in silence for a while. Then I called Fatima. They found me, I said. A beat. Which part hurts most? None of them said they were sorry, I answered. That's the part that hurts. Not the asking. The not sorry. If you have ever been the person your family counted on until you stopped being convenient, and then they came back years later not with accountability, not with acknowledgement, but with a request, you know exactly what those 29 messages felt like. It feels like being proven right about something you desperately wanted to be wrong about. And that is a terrible kind of being right. What none of them knew, what my father had absolutely no way of knowing when he typed those messages, was that in 6 weeks, I was scheduled to give a keynote address at a healthcare workforce development conference in Jackson, Mississippi. 220 attendees, hospital administrators, state health officials, community organizers, board members from across the region. A conference promoted in 3 regional health publications and 2 Mississippi news platforms. My photograph, my name, my title. Mama C had seen the announcement in a newsletter from a regional nonprofit she subscribed to. I don't believe she sent it to cause anything. She was 77 years old, and she had been carrying her pride about me privately for 8 years, and she was tired of carrying it alone. She sent the announcement to Aunt Rochelle. Rochelle showed Raymond, and Raymond, who had told the people of Claremont for 8 years that his daughter had cracked under pressure, finally understood what that pressure had actually produced. That was how they found me. I almost withdrew from the conference. I called the event coordinator and held the words I need to step back in my mouth for a long and serious moment. I thought about walking into that ballroom. I thought about my father in the audience. I thought about every version of that story he had told at church, at family dinners, to anyone who asked where Simone went. And then I thought about Mama C standing on the porch of that Birdsong Roadhouse at 12:40 inches the morning, watching my taillights go, in her housecoat and her slippers, not crying, not calling after me, just watching me go. I'll be there, I told the coordinator. The conference was held on a Thursday evening in a hotel ballroom in Jackson. I arrived early and walked the room alone before the crowd filled it. I was checking the podium, adjusting my notes, trying to slow my breathing in the way Fatima had taught me that works about 40% of the time. That was when I rounded a pillar and saw Mama C. She was sitting at a table near the front, in her good church coat, a pearl pin at her collar, hands folded in her lap, perfectly composed, and Fatima was standing beside her chair, having driven 6 hours without telling me, as a surprise. The world went briefly sideways. I excused myself to the hotel bathroom, cried for approximately 5 minutes, fixed my face, and came back out. My father was 3 tables back, Andre beside him, Aunt Rochelle on the end. They had driven nearly 4 hours. My father had on his good shirt a dark blue button-down I recognized from the 2 or 3 times a year he wore it for something that mattered. He looked older, smaller, somehow, in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size and everything to do with what the room was about to require of him. The moderator introduced me. She listed my credentials, my career trajectory, the nursing workforce scholarship I had established through my hospital network for students from rural Mississippi communities. I heard the room respond. I heard, underneath the applause, one specific voice from the table near the front. Yes, Mama C said quietly. Yes, yes. Like she was calling weather. I stepped to the podium. I gave my prepared remarks: rural health equity, workforce retention in underserved communities, the specific pipeline failures that keep clinical talent from returning to the places that need them most. I was specific. I was composed. I had done the work. and I was not going to diminish it by apologizing for knowing it. Near the close, I paused. I looked out at that ballroom and felt something I had not expected arriving in that moment. Stillness. Absolute, bedrock stillness. The kind that lives on the other side of a long time being afraid. I grew up about 2.5 hours from this hotel, I said. Some of the people in this room tonight know my family. The room changed. I left home at 26 with one bag and $420. That money wasn't mine. It had been saved quietly, a little at a time, by someone who understood what I was going to need, long before I had the courage to ask for it. I did not look at my father. I was not speaking to him. I did not need to. The most powerful act of care one person can offer another, I said, is to believe in what they are becoming before there is any evidence for it. To hold that belief privately, without praise, without recognition, because you know the person is going to need it more than you need to be thanked for it. Someone did that for me. Her name is Cecilia Tate, and she is sitting right there. 220 people turned to look at Mama C. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders shook. The applause was warm and long, and the kind that comes from a room that has recognized something true, not performed, not polished. Just true. Afterward, I found Mama C before I found anyone else. I walked to her table and held her hands and stayed there without saying a word, because some things are too full for language, and the attempt to put them into sentences would only make them smaller. Then my father found me. He stood at a slight distance, like he wasn't certain of his welcome, which was a posture I had never seen on him. He looked at the floor more than he looked at me. His expression was complicated in a way I struggled to name, like several feelings were competing, and none of them was winning cleanly. "You did real good up there," he said. "Thank you, Raymond." A pause. Long enough to have weight. "I didn't know," he started, then stopped. "I know you didn't," I said. "You didn't ask." He looked at the floor again. I let him. "The procedure," he said. "I understand if—" "I got your message," I said. "I'll think about it." That was honest. It was also everything I had available for him that night. Across the room, Andre caught my eye. He nodded once. Not a thank you, not an apology. A nod that said, "I see you. I see what you built." The first genuine acknowledgement I had received from my brother in 8 years. I nodded back. I walked Mama C to Fatima's car myself, her arm tucked in mine, her pearl pin catching the light of the parking lot. She was quiet for most of the walk. "How do you feel?" she asked when we reached the car. I thought about it honestly. "Like I've been carrying something for 8 years, I said, and I finally set it down in a room full of people who could see the weight of it. She squeezed my hand 3 times. That was her way of saying I love you when the words felt too ordinary for what she meant. In the weeks that followed, the truth moved the way truth always moves through a small town, slowly at first, and then everywhere at once. People who had accepted my father's story for 8 years had a different version now, with a room full of witnesses behind it. His church friends, his neighbors, his own brothers. He never sent a follow-up request. Neither did Andre. Neither did Terrell. About 6 weeks after the conference, a card arrived at my house in Houston. My father's handwriting. Unsteady, unpracticed, like someone writing in a language they once knew fluently, and had let go rusty from disuse. 8 sentences, no excuses, no ask. He said he had stayed silent when he should have stood up for me. He said he had told a story about me that wasn't accurate, because the true one was harder for him to carry. He said he did not expect anything. He just needed me to know that he knew. 8 sentences. I read them 4 times. Then I put the card in the same drawer where I keep Mama C's white envelope, still folded, still soft at the edges, still carrying the memory of $420 and a 12:40 goodbye on a porch in Claremont, Mississippi. I haven't called him back yet, but I haven't thrown the card away either. And here is what I want you to hold on to. If you made it this far, because if you stayed this long, you stayed for a reason. There is a difference between help me and I'm sorry. One is a transaction, one is a doorway. You cannot walk through the transaction and expect it to take you somewhere real. Real reconciliation, the kind that might actually hold weight, starts with accountability, not a request. It starts with someone being willing to name clearly what they did before they name what they need. You are not cold for requiring that. You are not difficult. You are not the problem that everyone decided you were when you stopped being convenient. The bravest thing I did was not leaving at 26. Any person who is scared enough and desperate enough can leave. The bravest thing was staying in Houston, staying in my own story, building something true and solid in the dark, and then being still enough, 8 years later, to let them come to me, rather than running toward the apology I had been waiting for. Because here is what I have learned. I could not have received that card from my father if I had gone back. He needed to see what I had built before he could see what he had dismissed. The room full of witnesses was not revenge. It was context. It was the truth arriving in a form he could no longer rewrite. And some people only understand a thing when 220 strangers are reflecting it back at them. That is not your failure. That is just the shape of how some lessons land. So, I want to ask you something, and I want you to genuinely sit with it tonight. If someone who hurt you really hurt you, in the specific way that only someone who was supposed to love you can reach out after years of silence, what would you need to hear before you open that door? Would I need your help be enough? Or would you need the 2 words that make everything that comes after them possible? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think I should call my father back. Drop a 2 if you think I should wait longer. Drop a 3 if you believe some things, once broken in a particular way, don't get a door opened for them no matter what they write. I genuinely want to know where you stand, and I want to know who is out there with me right now, what city you're watching from, what time it is where you are, whether you're sitting with something similar tonight. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever been the one who left, the one who stayed too long, the one who finally stopped waiting for accountability and just started building, share this. Leave a comment. Tell someone. The only thing that beats the algorithm is people who care enough to say, this one was worth hearing. And if you're new here, please subscribe. I look for these stories because I believe the people inside them deserve to be witnessed. I'll be here every week. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston, Texas to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.